people to live in peace, act with love and justice. But there's a problem. Something compels us humans to constantly wreak havoc and destruction instead. And we call this evil.
And from the Bible's point of view, evil ruins things in at least two ways. There's a direct effect of our evil, like when someone steals from another person, they've created injustice.
And therefore, they owe something to make it right.
But there's another indirect effect of evil, because they've also ruined the environment of the relationship, creating a lack of trust, there's emotional damage. It's like vandalism, and they need to make that right, too.
Now, many people believe, hey, God is good, he should be the one to just get rid of all the evil in the world.
But let's be honest, I mean, the evil that I see everywhere out there, it's the same evil that's inside of me. We have all contributed, and we keep doing it.
And so this kind of puts us in a bind. If God's going to rid the world of evil, he'll have to get rid of us.
And this is what's so remarkable about the story of the Bible. This God is so good that not only is he going to rid the world of evil, he's going to do it without destroying humanity.
So how is he going to do that?
Well, early in the story of the Bible, we're introduced to this practice of animal sacrifice, which I know seemed weird to us, but for the Israelites, it was a very powerful symbol of God's justice and of his grace. So remember, I'm a contributor to the evil that's in the world. I should be removed. But God is allowing this animal's life to be a substitute. It's symbolically dying in my place. And the biblical word for this is atonement, which means to cover over someone's death. But there's a second part to this ritual. Remember, evil also causes this relational vandalism. And in the Bible, this idea is described as polluting or defiling the land and making it unclean. So the priest would symbolically wash away the vandalism by sprinkling the animal's blood in different parts of the temple.
So the animal's blood is cleaning things?
Well, remember, this is a symbol, and it's a symbol that we're not used to. The blood represents life. And the sprinkling of the blood is this representation of how God is cleaning away these indirect consequences of evil in their community. In the Bible, this process is called purification. And so the temple and the land now become a clean space where God and his people can live together in peace.
So this ritual makes things right between Israel and God.
And more than that, the Israelites experience God's love and his grace through these symbols. And by being forgiven, ideally, this would compel them to become people of love and grace too.
Right, that's the ideal, but it wasn't always happening.
Right. So the prophet Isaiah, for example, he talks a lot about this. He opens his book by saying that the continual sacrifices of the Israelites had become meaningless because they were also allowing great evil in their midst, ignoring the poor and the oppressed. Even the Israelite kings were distorting justice. But Isaiah looked forward to the day when a new king from the line of David would come and deal with evil, but in a surprising way. The king would become a servant, and not just serve, but also suffer and die for the evil committed by his own people. And his life would be offered as a sacrifice.
This is the promise Jesus believed he was fulfilling. He's the king of Israel, suffering and dying on the cross.
In fact, Jesus himself used Isaiah's words when he said that he came to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. And that word ransom refers to his sacrifice of atonement. And so all over the New Testament, we hear about how Jesus' death was an atoning sacrifice for us. It covered the debt that humans owe God for contributing to all of the evil and death in this world. But the New Testament authors also talk about Jesus' death as providing purification. And so we hear about Jesus' blood as a symbol of his life, having this ability to wash away the vandalism that evil has caused in us and around us, so we can now live at peace with God.
So that's the meaning behind Jesus' death. But there's more to the story.
Yeah, the New Testament makes this powerful claim that Jesus' death was not final. He rose from the dead. And so he's the sacrifice who broke the power of death and evil, which means that he lives on to offer his life to anyone who will accept it. He is the perfect sacrifice to which all the previous sacrifices were pointing all along.
So because of Jesus, the early Christians stopped participating in the ritual animal sacrifice.
But they were given new rituals. There are two that Jesus taught his followers to perform. The first is called baptism. Just as Jesus died, so going into the water becomes this personal connection you now have to his death. And in coming out of the water, you, so to speak, come back to life with Jesus. So baptism is the sacred ritual that joins your story to Jesus' death and his resurrection. The second ritual is called the Lord's Supper, which is a reenactment of Jesus' last meal with his disciples, and he used bread and wine to portray his coming death as a sacrifice. And so now, followers of Jesus, they take the bread and the cup regularly to remember and to participate in the power of Jesus' death and in his life.
So these rituals, they remind us of God's love and encourage us to live a life of love and grace.
But they do more than that. They connect us to a new life source. The very power that brought Jesus back from the dead is the same power that can deal with the evil in our own lives and transform us into people who lead lives of love and peace. Hi, this is Tim.
We all long for the world to be good.
Good morning, everyone. Let's all stand for worship.
saying, "Come, Holy Spirit, you are welcome." And the rest of you, not the Holy Spirit, but those made in the image of God, are welcome as well. Welcome to Chinatown Peace Church. We're grateful that you have joined us this morning as we worship God, our Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer. My name is Lydia Crutwell, and I'm your host for this morning, and I'm pleased to welcome Justin and his wife Dana. Justin is our guest preacher this morning. He's one of the pastors at Peace Mennonite Church down in Richmond, one of our sister churches, and we're going to be hearing from him about life in the land as we reflect on our relationship with God's creation through the words of Leviticus 25. This is part of our summer Hot Topics series, and I was thinking this is the one that is one of the hottest of topics, in the sense of there are many places around the world that are experiencing difficult relationships with the land, and complicated relationships with the land for various reasons right now. Places suffering from drought, from flooding, from fire, pollution, all sorts of things caused by man-made climate change. So let us begin, let us continue in worship with prayer. God of abundance, we give thanks for the sun, for water, soil, and for air, on which our lives depend moment by moment. And we lift up to you those people in the world who have too much or not enough of one or the other of those. We are aware of our frailty, our complete dependence on this good creation which you have given us. And we are also aware of the ways in which we have abused and taken advantage of your good creation. As we worship you this morning, may we do so with humility, coming to you with gratitude for your gifts and awareness of how we are called to steward and tend them well. Amen.
Stand again.
This is my prayer in my hunger.
reading this morning is a longer one, but it's very, very fascinating. So settle in for a little bit, my friends, and hear now the word of the Lord. The Lord said to Moses at Mount Sinai, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I am going to give you, the land itself must observe a Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 years sow your fields, and for 6 years prune your vineyards and gather your crops. But in the 7th year, the land is to have a year of Sabbath rest, Sabbath to the Lord. Do not sow your fields or prune your vineyards. Do not reap what grows of itself or harvest the grapes of your untended vines. The land is to have a year of rest. Whatever the land yields during the Sabbath year will be food for you, for yourself, your male and female servants, and the hired worker and temporary resident who live among you, as well as for your livestock and the wild animals in your land. Whatever the land produces may be eaten. Count off 7 Sabbath years, 7 times 7 years, so that the 7 Sabbath years amount to a period of 49 years. Then have the trumpet sounded everywhere on the 10th day of the 7th month. On the Day of Atonement, sound the trumpet throughout your land. Consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. Each of you is to return to your family property and to your own clan. The 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. Do not sow and do not reap what grows of itself or harvest the untended vines. For it is a jubilee and is to be holy for you. Eat only what is taken directly from the fields. In this year of jubilee, everyone is to return to their own property. If you sell land to any of your own people or buy land from them, do not take advantage of each other. You are to buy from your own people on the basis of the number of years since the Jubilee, and they are to sell to you on the basis of the number of years left for harvesting crops. When the years are many, you are to increase the price. When the years are few, you are to decrease the price, because what is really being sold to you is the number of crops. Do not take advantage of each other, but fear your God. I am the Lord your God. Follow my decrees and be careful to obey my laws, and you will live safely in the land. Then the land will yield its fruit, and you will eat your fill and live there in safety. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be unto God.
I really need to read scripture aloud to myself more often. As I was reading that aloud, I was like, oh, this has things to say not just about the environment and creation, but also about land prices and about housing and about all sorts of things. But we will let Justin unpack some of that for us this morning. So if you want to come up, Justin, I will be delighted to pray for you. And Justin's going to put himself on he said he's like, it feels like a sitting on a stool kind of sermon. So that's what we've got this morning. God, thank you for this, your faithful servant, Justin. Thank you for leading him and guiding him throughout his life. Thank you for bringing him here to us this morning. We pray that the words of his mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts may be pleasing in your sight, O Lord. May we have open hearts and minds to hear what you have to say to us through him this morning. And may you take his offering, his work in preparation, and bless it and lift it up, that we may know what it is to follow you, our God. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I don't know, it felt like this was a sitting vibe kind of a sermon when I walked in this morning. Certain vibes that you like walk and you're like, oh, I gotta stand for this sermon. This is a church that the guy needs to stand in. But I walked in here this morning, I'm like, yeah, this is kind of this is sitting attention. Y'all awake? All right, just checking. This is my first time guest preaching ever, so.
Yay! May it come to the last.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Hope those at home, happy that you get to join us and have the tech to make that happen. It's an honor to be here, to be part of your worship service here in Chinatown, to be received as kin in this great family. In my years so far, I think one of the most amazing things that I've experienced is still being received by like literal strangers. in so many places I've traveled for like no other reason than because like I'm also someone trying to walk in the ways of Jesus. I think that is amazing. So thank you so much for having me. It's fun. I think I was with you on Zoom like a year ago, over a year ago, I think. Yeah, but as I said, this is the first time guest preaching in person. So today sucks. You can blame it on that. I joked with him that he's not here, so I can say anything I want, and he didn't seem too alarmed. Even if he knew I was only half joking, but I think that's credit more to him than to me. Just doesn't seem like a guy that can be phased too easily. A bit about me, for those whom I'm new, I'm Justin, I'm the pastor at the Peace Churches down in Richmond, one where Tim used to be. I'm originally from Edmonton. My parents found their way there from Hong Kong, winding around all over North America. Before I was a pastor, I was a student at Columbia in Abbotsford, but I've also spent time in restaurants, and cafes, and clothing stores, and culinary school at Alberta, University of Alberta. In many ways, I landed in this pastoring thing pretty randomly. I literally had no idea what the Mennonites were until I got to Columbia. So I take it as no small miracle that I'm here with you speaking today. It didn't feel that long ago that I was also just sitting in a pew on a Sunday morning like many of you. Just a regular guy trying to figure it out. I'm still that in many ways, but looking back and reflecting on my story now, it was honestly super random, but in a good way. I don't know, maybe not so random that I've ended up here, so I don't take any of this for granted. But let's dive a little bit further into that idea of our stories and let that lead into our text a little bit. I remember one year when I was in my teens, I was like, I'm gonna make a Bible through. I didn't know how to start, so I was like, I'll start from the top. I got through Genesis, I'm like, I think I've heard most of that. So that was a little bit. Then I got to Exodus, right? And I was like, I think I've heard most of that too, but sometimes it was really weird. And I got through Leviticus. And then, like many well-intentioned, very earnest people, that's where I stopped. Between like the blood of the cows and the bodily fluids, I was like, who reads this? So I skipped the next 36 books, got to Matthew, where it was supposedly safe and sound. And from then on, that's kind of how I read the Bible. Like Genesis and then Matthew. The Old Testament was confusing, it kind of just felt really irrelevant. God was so angry all the time. And New Testament was safer, apparently. Fast forward several years though, and I'm at CBC. I'm just riveted, right? I'm in one of my favorite classes ever, Old Testament theology, taught by an amazing prof out there. And to this day, I don't think I've ever had more fun in class. It was a truly transformational thing. There's a type of work now I see that was necessary for me to unravel a book like Leviticus. OT theology challenged my stereotypes of the Hebrew scriptures. It helped me grasp kind of the greater arc of everything. It kind of really challenged my view of the God behind it all, right? This supposedly enigmatic Yahweh who I used to believe Jesus needed to come and fix in the New Testament, kind of like any sequel that fixes the first, like Thor 3 fixed Thor 1 and 2. Ultimately, I learned through this class that Yahweh has these beautiful intentions for all creation. You can't really understand the good news of our faith unless you understand the Old Testament. And so after OT theology, when from time to time I would end up in texts like the one we're about to engage in today, thank you, Lydia, for reading. This book that stopped me in my tracks all those years ago. I just felt like after this class, everything moved up in a beautiful, beautiful way. But before I continue, can I just see a quick show of hands who has actually read Leviticus from cover to cover, like from start to end? That's actually a really high ratio, awesome. Listening counts, yeah, audiobooks are reading. It's not an easy book. So awesome for those of you who've read it, and for those of you who haven't, totally fine. It's not something you can go into flying blind. Imagine if like 3,000 years in the future, someone with zero knowledge of our country just flipped open a book of our laws, right? Doesn't really carry one-to-one as a comparison because law is the word, but even today it's hard enough to open up like a book of laws, right? But imagine a different time or place, right? Imagine different people doing it. It's a little bit like what it's like to read Leviticus for us today. So I totally get it when people are like, I don't read it. And I'm like, yeah, it's tough. But that's actually in part why I wanted to explore it today. To me, it is such an important book. We don't engage it. We lose some pretty integral parts of the tradition we've inherited as Jesus followers. If we believe the Bible is important, I'm interested in how we make that belief real. I think we find out how real that belief is at the frontier of what we do and do not read in the Bible. For many, that frontier is a book like it was for me, like Leviticus. We just say, well, Jesus did away with it, right? Or it's ancient and it's irrelevant, who cares? Just throw it out. There's times I felt like that, honestly. Do we refer to it in an oversimplified way, though, or do we, like, that's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, right? Do we just pull out a verse or two when we need it, in chapter 18, to say, it's so simple, God says it right here, right? Otherwise never actually engage it? Do we take it, kind of as the really complex text it is, developed over centuries by ancient Yahweh followers, both full of really great things for us to digest, but dare I say some questionable parts too? Like Jacob, who wrestled with God and said, I will not let go unless you bless me. I want us to be like that with books like Leviticus. Because in between the lines is a story. One of a people figuring out a long time ago what it meant to belong to Yahweh. As scholar Jacob Milgram says, underlying these rituals is an intricate web of values that purport to model to us how we should relate to God and to one another. Leviticus is the central text of the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. And Torah undergirds the entire Bible. Unless you understand Torah, you cannot understand Jesus. So let's understand Torah a little bit better today. As Christians, we believe the God revealed in Jesus is the God of Leviticus. So this then is kind of the framework from where we enter our book today. So I'll pray and then we can dive in. Yahweh, we pray for you to pop up and out of these pages today. In between the rituals, tasks, and lists, show us how you were present with these people in this age. As a result, may we be more aware of how you are present with us here today in old and new ways. Amen. I'll be honest with you, I wrote this sermon this summer for one of my churches weeks ago, and I wrote it not knowing whether I would use it again with you today. I know it's a little faux pas to admit you're reusing or repurposing a sermon, even though every pastor does it. It's just been a wild summer on my end, so I was like, oh, let's see. But given all that has transpired the last couple weeks, especially, this might actually be a better time for the sermon than when I wrote it. And given the context here, like physically, literally, compared to Richmond, where we have our massive building, today actually might be a better place to say to give this sermon on multiple levels and repurpose it. I say this for a few reasons. For starters, I probably don't have to ask if you've seen the news lately about Penn City on East Hastings, right, and the multifaceted individual and structural difficulties there. Most of you can probably educate me about that. I'm a guest here and have the years of experience I'm sure many of you do. Another reason is what's happened actually this past week south of the border has got everybody hot. Around debt forgiveness, right, and student loans. Couldn't open up any of my social medias this past week without seeing another hot take. It's been really big. Lastly, to round that all out, I'm guessing many of you in the last few weeks have checked tabs on things like those wildfires raging on. And you're like, where? Which ones are you referring to? That's exactly it. Or maybe Pope Francis, right? In his penitential pilgrimage across these lands, came to London town, right? Commonwealth Stadium, where I used to watch football games. In my opinion, all these things are coincidentally, maybe not so coincidentally, tied to our text today in Leviticus 25. I'll tell you a quick story, a personal story to tell you to pull it all together. This past spring, Dana, my wife, and I, we had a mission. We were determined to get our little garden together. Where we have like 3 or 4 square feet, maybe, of garden space, and this year we wanted to make the most of it. Last summer was like the first time ever gardening for either of us. We've helped out in the past, but like this is the first time we were in charge. It was a disaster. We didn't really know what we were doing. We didn't know how much work it was going to take. And after that first heat wave in June, I think, everything was dead. This summer, we were determined to do better. A few weeks ago, as I was watering, I saw a beautiful sign. I've been hoping for weeks, this little green tomato. I was like, overjoyed. In spring, we turned over the soil, we pulled out the weeds, we cleaned the yard, we put seedlings in the ground, we watered and fertilized it for weeks, and here we were. Literal fruit of our labor, pure vegetable. I've taken tomatoes for granted my entire life. I've eaten thousands of them. It's one of my favorite things. These ones were special. Really grown them. And this connected me, I think, to something so wonderful I couldn't describe it. And since then, Dana and I have been enjoying the abundance that has stemmed from 3 tomato plants. We have so many we don't know what to do with them. So what ties this little story of me in my garden to 10 cities, to wildfires, to popes, and to debt forgiveness? Well, in ways big and small, many of these things begin with land. What the land represents. Land is both a physical reality and a powerful idea. And it impacts so many aspects of our lives as creatures on this green earth. Last couple of years, I've learned people understand land actually really differently. Some see it as a resource, right? Some see it as money. It's equivocated to money. Some see it as a sacred gift. Some, like myself growing up, never thought much of it growing up. And it's a way of nothing but land. In front of us in Leviticus, we see one key way Israel understood land and the role on it. I hope that by engaging this morning, that we are challenged to think about the land we are all on. What can we draw from this ancient text? As I said a little earlier, Leviticus is in the middle of Torah. It's the heart of the foundation. I always thought that was really weird, right? Like it should be something else, right? It should be like the Exodus, right? Or the 10 Commandments right in the middle of, like the core, the heart of it all. But if you pick up Leviticus and you read it with no context, it's like super random. You're like, why is this in the middle of the Torah? Right? It's dense. Honestly, it never feels relevant. And why is like such obscure stuff in the middle of it? When was the last time you worried about your grain sacrifice or your clothes molding? Right? I did an experiment, just flipped it open, and Leviticus 12 or 15 about molding clothes. But I think that's exactly it. Leviticus is a window into the life of a people long ago. The key is it's a window into their life long ago under Yahweh. It's a window into their routines, into their rituals, and through that window, we see a story of how Israel subsumed so much under their God, from the most mundane to the most sacred. If people 3,000 years in the future studied our laws on top of the very important things they would see, they'd find some really mundane things too, right? I don't know if anyone here is in law school, but they'd see like laws on how we zone properties or how we designate a charity, real specific. You have to be real careful there. Or like things like how do we file taxes, right? These things are all really random until you kind of figure out, actually they reveal the story of the people behind it. Zoning properties says a lot about us as a city. Charities tell us a lot about what we care about. And taxes, as many of us have to do at the end of the year, tell a story of our year. We can think similarly a little bit with Leviticus. By studying it, we get a glimpse into the life of a people under Yahweh in the ancient Near East. The more I've considered Leviticus that way, the more I think its location actually might make a lot of sense in the Torah. Because like at this point in the story, Israel had just been freed, right? From Egypt, they arrived at Sinai, Moses received those holy tablets, the tabernacle was just built, and that ended Exodus. It skipped to Numbers, right? Israel is on their way to the promised land once again. In between, though, we have Leviticus. I think one thing is key in this. At the end of Exodus, Israel is a rebirthed people on the road to a new home. But before they arrived, they needed to know, now that Yahweh has redeemed us with mighty acts out of the hands of our enslavers, now that we have received the Ten Commandments, now that we've built this tabernacle, how do we respond? So what? How do we live in this promised land when we're there? Is it just, God saved us, now we do whatever we want? Yahweh upheld his end of our relationship. He's listened to our cries. He's remembered our people and remembered the promises given to our ancestors, Abraham, and redeemed us. And now how do we live, right? Difference does it make? Well, now. Isn't that question though, like what now? Not exactly what we would die every day asking our faith journey, especially after some major things happen, right? What now? As we know Jesus more and more, we always ask as a result, what next? How do I respond? I used to be this, now I am this. What now? In many ways, that is the book of Leviticus. It's Israel's what now? What now after Sinai, before the promised land? So Leviticus in this way might serve as an important bridge. There can be a lot explored here, but today we're dropping specifically into chapter 25, like in Google Maps when you drop the dude into the street view, right? That's what we're doing today. We're zooming in on one aspect of the what now. But this one aspect is also important, because I think it gets to the heart of a lot of what the book is about. In Leviticus 25, verses 1 to 18, it's funny, this was so long, or 1 to 19 was, this was a long one. I almost wanted to do the whole chapter, but
I know.
I was like, no, don't do it. But in verses 1 to 19, Sabbath is the focus of our first paragraph. So if you have your Bibles with you, I will invite you to open them so you can follow along. Or you can listen along. Starting in verse 2, Yahweh says, when you enter the land I am giving you, the land itself must observe Sabbath. For 6 years, plant and prune and harvest, but on the 7th, the land must have complete rest. You may eat whatever the land produces on its own, right? Your servants can eat, your hired workers, your temporary residents, even the domestic and the wild animals. All of them may eat. We generally, especially I think for me growing up, think of Sabbath spiritually, right? Growing up, it's a day of worship, right? We think of it individually sometimes as rest. I gotta take a Sabbath, I gotta rest. In professional context, it's a sabbatical, right? A sabbatical is a time away. More than just for people, though, apparently, Sabbath in Leviticus is expansive, encompassing even the land Israel is about to enter. In Yahweh's vision for the world, apparently, the land rests too. For Israel, a bunch of farmers, right, this would have been really tough. It's the very thing they relied on, or many of them relied on to live, and they're told to refrain from it. Apparently that's not too big though, as the sixth commandment from Sinai, it's extended here to encompass even the land. That was radical then. If we found ways to apply it now, it would still be pretty radical. I think of the big extractive industries all around the world. taken from the land. How radical would it be if people said, we need to let the land rest. Give the earth her Sabbath. Let's just stop for a year. Give the soil, the animals their rest. Give the fish in the ocean their rest. Give the things we're taking out of the ground their rest. Give the forest, give the rivers their rest. Wouldn't that be wild? No pun intended. As part of the Mennonite Church Canada book club this past year, I and a bunch of other Mennonites around the country were encouraged to watch a talk given by Naomi Klein and Winona LaDuke, centered around extractivism and its central role in our multi-layered global predicament. If you have a free hour and a half today, I'd encourage you to go on YouTube. Look it up. I wonder how principles of Sabbath could add to that conversation when we take that up in our churches. But in case you think that's it, there's more, there's way more. Leviticus 25 won't let you go yet. Verse 8, in addition, you must count off 7 Sabbaths, 49 years, set it apart. It will be a time to proclaim freedom through the land of Jubilee. Everyone may return to their ancestors' land and to their clan. Don't plant, don't store, eat whatever the land produces on its own, base your sale of the land on this Jubilee and when it is coming, and do not take advantage of each other, for Yahweh is your God. And if you follow these decrees and teachings, you will eat your fill, and you will live securely on the land. Wow. Jubilee, Sabbath of Sabbaths, a super Sabbath, where in addition to a regular Sabbath, people are set free. In Jubilee, a fresh start breaks through, a powerful sign of Yahweh's ongoing liberation. Not just a one-time event in Egypt, the people of Yahweh are to consistently experience that reality of liberation in new and ongoing ways, as Israel is required to enshrine the Jubilee in its laws and its teachings as they grow in their peoplehood in a new land. Earlier I asked how Leviticus can be taken as Israel's what now? And here we see that played out in radical power. In this ancient world, there were so many ways a person could end up a slave or a servant, right? Far from their homes. Through war, or through poverty, through debt. Someone could find themselves serving another on foreign land with no hope in sight, going home to the family and to the land that sustained them. In the ancient Near East, occasionally, a new king might come along, right, if you're in another country and be like, oh, I'm gonna be popular, I'm gonna free all the slaves for a bit. But that was pretty rare, and often they didn't follow through. Here, we see how under Yahweh's rule, this was commanded. There is no, oh, well, it depends, how much did they owe? Or, well, that's not really fair, so-and-so, they worked really hard to pay off all their debts, so they could go home. Why should others get a free pass, right? In Jubilee, no matter who you were or what you had done, the promise of a new life held true. Come Jubilee, you could return to your ancestral land in all it represented. Life, community, belonging, a home. Who has a lot to gain in this situation and who has much to lose under the system of Jubilee? Consider the rich and the poor. Consider the creditor and the debtor. Consider the liberated and the indentured. Consider Jesus' words in Luke. Whoever has been forgiven little loves little. Maybe you have a lot of debt. And this type of talk, I don't know, maybe it hits a little too close to home. It hits close to home for me. Because you worry at night, maybe, sometimes, how you're going to pay all that off. I do. If so, we're all in the same boat as many, many, many people around the world today caught in this brutal system of lending. How tangibly good would the news of Jubilee be today to those caught in these things? Or maybe Jubilee feels irrelevant because you aren't in debt. And you're like, hey, I'm not a slave, I'm not a servant. If so, consider your faith journey. Is Jubilee not the great gift of our God in a multitude of ways? All of us ensnared in this great system of brokenness can always find a fresh start in our God, no matter the life we have lived. In Luke 4, Jesus declares the Spirit of Yahweh is upon him to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Is this favor, this year of favor, not an outworking and continued outworking of Jubilee? No matter the type of debt, we can see how the reign of God in ancient Israel and now through Jesus, ongoing and ongoing and ongoing, breaks in to end that debt. And it is ended so that we may all return home to a community, to life, to belonging. For Israel, we see how all of this was wrapped up in an idea of Jubilee, that the land and its people may have life and have life to the full. As I touched on earlier, many struggles we face today begin with land. From this climate emergency that we are desperately in, to housing and food shortages, to disputes all around the world. Land is at the center. Think of Palestine, right? Ukraine, Tigray, Taiwan, right here in Canada and beyond. On a smaller scale, how about our homes, our churches, our cities? How are we to live in the land in a way that makes evident the power of God, God's reign and Jubilee, as we continue to figure out what that means today? I don't think Leviticus holds every answer, but there's one vital takeaway I think we can all go home with today. Key to the idea of land in the Bible is that the whole world is Yahweh's and everything in it. Israel's very identity as a people was tied up to this. The right to land began with the promises to Abraham and to David. And the Bible comes to us as the literature of a people who lost that land in the ancient world. When Babylon, Assyria, Rome devastated them, Israel needed answers, right? They were the chosen people of God. How could this happen? The answers our Bible seem to reflect on over and over and over again are stark. Many of the authors consistently say throughout the narratives that Israel failed to live out the world. They say Israel forgot Yahweh. They forgot the teachings like the ones here today in Leviticus that they were supposed to know. These things were supposed to remind them that the world is Yahweh's and everything in it. And so true to Yahweh's warning, the land spit them out. Do we fail today in similar ways? We are not Israel. But if we believe the whole earth is Yahweh's and everything in it, does that confront us on a daily basis? Is rest vital to us on a daily basis? Does our land get to rest? Do we find ways to break free the chains of debt and restore people to the dignity of their homes, or a home? In Leviticus, we see a model of rest for all creation in Sabbath and in Jubilee. That should strike us. As Christians, built in a country built upon many extractive industries, and where many profit off debt and poverty. I am very grateful to live in this land. I know many today here are too. But I pray that our gratitude is continually matched by our sense of responsibility to help heal this land. For this land was someone else's home long before any of us got here. And many on it now are struggling to get by. as the power of a book like Leviticus. By learning the story of the people and the God behind it, we today are confronted with our own stories. Leviticus's power and its truth are not in asking us to duplicate its world, but in asking us to continue saying, what now? In light of what we have seen, in light of what we have heard, how do we live in this land? When you listen to the news this week, or if you're out and about, and you see Catholic cities, you see popes on the news, you see wildfires, you hear folks complaining about debt forgiveness, or if you're simply in your garden enjoying its abundance, or someone else's garden enjoying their fruits. I pray God shows you the way of Sabbath and of Jubilee, and what it can mean for us today on this land. Let's pray. Creator, the world is yours and everything in it. May we never forget that. Empower us today to live as your people, as we draw divine inspiration from even the most seemingly obscure texts, like Leviticus. And may we be a continued vision of your reign on earth, knowing that you, since the very beginning, have been trying to bring shalom to all things and all people. In these name we pray. Amen.
Please stand for the song of response. Glory in creation.
Please rise now that you may receive the benediction. What now? In light of what we have seen and heard this morning, may you go out knowing that Yahweh, our God, has good and beautiful intentions for you, for all of us, and for our neighbors and for creation. Thank you for this land that we live on as settlers, and may we live lovingly on it and pay attention to our indigenous neighbors who have been here long before we even imagined this place existed. May we offer Jubilee joy, Sabbath joy to all we meet, that they too may know the abundance of God. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.